Joe Rogan and Donald Trump had a podcast, and I have to say it was absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely found myself enjoying the podcast, mainly because there was no interruption. There was no narrative that was being drawn. I enjoyed it very much. I think that this is a great format for a candidate to kind of communicate with the audience, so then the audience can kind of get an idea of who they are. Obviously, when we rely on these news outlets or even political pundits, these independent political pundits, we tend to draw a narrative around what they think. And unfortunately, it kind of just poisons the well in a sense. But when you have somebody who is more or less in the middle, kind of like Joe Rogan, or even though he says that he leans more on the left, I think it's great when you have someone like him just come in and not try to challenge the candidate, but instead just allows them to just be human, you know. And again, I know that there's going to be some people out there that are going to disagree. Like Destiny, he thinks that you have to call out everybody every single time, which I guess when it comes to his way, his style of communicating with somebody, I guess that's okay for him. But oftentimes I don't want to see that. Instead, I just want to go ahead and see who exactly is it that I'm voting for. And I think that Joe Rogan did an excellent job here, because now we get to see who Trump is. And that's great. So of course, Trump and Joe Rogan, they started off a bit awkward. It was a little bit rough. But it was absolutely hilarious, because you can see that at the very beginning, Joe Rogan, he ends up asking Trump, you know, what was it like to be on the first day in office as president?
What was it like when you actually got in? Because nobody really can prepare you for that. When you're running for president, you don't really know what it's going to be like when you actually get into office.
It starts off at 4 minutes and 40 seconds. And here's the recording, the clip that I grabbed. As you can see, I was moving around the mouse so it can show the options, and you can see that it starts at 4 minutes and 40 seconds. That dragged on. Like, you wouldn't believe it, man. It dragged on until the 15-minute mark. You could even listen to Joe Rogan ask the question once again.
What did you think it was going to be like? Versus, like, did you have any ideas of what it was going to be like, and what was different?
Well, I was always involved in politics, but usually from the standpoint of a donor.
Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I yawned. If they would have placed an ad in the middle of that Trump monologue and they were attempting to sell me pillows, I would have bought one right there in the spot, same day delivery. And then for another 3 minutes, he continues to just monologue. And Joe, he's trying to get back to the question, but obviously because this is Trump, he dominates, it just bulldozes over that question.
Everybody wants it.
But what I wanted to get
by the way, no matter what you do, but it's very dangerous to pick somebody outside of a politician.
Valiant effort, Joe, but just give up, man. You're not gonna get through him, man. There is no all of the above. There is only the one answer he gave. He did say that it was surreal, but then that was it. Then he just sails off into La La Land. From that point forward, believe it or not, it actually got a lot better. So that was the only awkward moment in the very beginning, and then everything else was just smooth sailing. Now, the last free topic we're going to talk about before we move into the political aspect of this video is Lake Tulare. So let's go ahead and showcase the clip where Joe Rogan kind of discusses Lake Tulare.
Did you know the center of California was a giant lake?
They have so much water.
You ever see what it looks like before they rerouted it?
I never saw that.
The center of California, like, what is it, 200 years ago? How long ago did they do that, Jamie? The center of California had a fucking enormous lake in the middle of California.
So they dumped it into the Pacific.
Who knows what they did? Show a photo of what it looked like back then.
It's a great system.
So that's what it looked like. Look at that image. Now, go to the one on the third from the right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was an enormous lake in the middle of California.
Now, this is the illustration that Joe Rogan is demonstrating on the podcast. However, there's one thing that I have to correct about this. This lake here is actually not Lake Tulare. That's actually Lake Corcoran. That lake existed 600,000 years ago. It's an ancient lake. The lake that he's referring to is Lake Tulare, which, yes, it was a large lake in California 200 years ago. And here's some satellite images so you guys can see what Lake Tulare looks like back 200 years ago compared to now. As you guys can see, the 1851 simulated satellite image on the left, you can see that Lake Tulare is visible, and in the 2013 actual satellite image, you can't even see it. But nothing compared to Lake Corcoran. Lake Tulare is puny, tiny. As a matter of fact, microbes needed to make reservations months in advance to even get a chance to infect the surface of the water. Now, it is true that people in California drain the lake intentionally so they can create farmland. However, it's called a ghost lake for a reason, because that lake continues to re-emerge, obviously because that's its natural settlement. it ends up re-emerging. As a matter of fact, 2023, it re-emerged and it submerged the entire town underwater, causing millions of dollars in damages. All right, so now we're done with the free topics. Let's go ahead and move on to the political topics. So I'm sure that you guys already know that Kamala Harris said a couple of things on the debate stage, such as there are no military members in combat zones or even war zones, which is a pretty interesting statement. But let's go ahead and check to see what they discussed on the Joe Rogan podcast, so then we can address it.
Well, the problem was they fact-checked you and they didn't fact-check her. And one of the most egregious examples of that was when she said that there are no troops right now deployed in war zones. Yeah. There's a very famous viral video that went online of troops in a war zone saying, well, what the fuck are we then? Because there's thousands of them.
And the video that he's referring to is a video where all of these soldiers, active members of the military, are just kind of looking around and asking themselves, hey man, like, we exist, right? Because we're here in a combat zone.
And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world. The first time this century. What? But let's understand.
So where the fuck are we right now?
Now, let's just say hypothetically that this video is fake, because I'm sure that some people are going to make that accusation or that assumption as well. Even if that is the case, there are still active members out in different parts of the country in the Middle East, because they're still training people in those combat zones, even if they're not actively fighting in those war zones or combat zones. And of course, I don't want to diminish their missions. There's many reasons why they're there, but that's the one that comes to mind because that's the one I'm familiar with. Yeah, it's low level conflict, but still dangerous enough to be present there, you know. And the next topic I want to talk about is how people accuse Donald Trump of admiring dictators.
If you take a look at North Korea, I was there. I mean, I was with Kim Jong. I had a great I got along great with him. You know, the press says he got along great. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing.
Now, when it comes to Donald Trump, he says stuff like this, where, like, you know, they ask him the question, like, what do you think? Who do you think is going to win, Ukraine or Russia? And he hesitates to answer the question. The reason why I think that he hesitates to answer the question is because when it comes to dictators, he wants to be on their good side. Because obviously, when you have a good relationship with these dictators, whether you hate them or not, they're most likely to comply with a demand that you could perhaps ask in the future. And I think that that's what Donald Trump is aiming to do, which is why he's not trying to ruffle any feathers when he talks about the Ukraine and Russia situation, because he has a plan as to how he's going to execute whatever plan he has. He already talked about how he wants to sit down with Putin and Zelensky, and he wants to negotiate a deal. He has something in his mind. And the reason why I think that it's not about admiring dictators is because there was this piece of information from one of his closest, not allies, but somebody who worked close with him. And I thought that that small detail was pretty revealing of how Trump viewed people around the world, especially dictators.
Gordon Sondland believes that a re-elected Donald Trump would be no pushover when it comes to standing up to dictators and despots.
I found two Donald Trumps. I found the show that was made for public consumption, and then I found the reality of sitting in small meetings, sitting in the car with him. I remember being with President Trump shortly after he met with Kim Jong-un, and the media was excoriating him over being too friendly, over not understanding what really North Korea is all about, as if, you know, he was seduced by this short Korean man who is a murderer and a thug. And we were in the car, and I said, Mr. President, cutting through the bullshit, tell me about Kim Jong-un. And he looked at me with a smile and he said, if that motherfucker had a knife, he could have gored me in the stomach. That told me everything I needed to know about his soberness when it came to these people.
Yeah, man, it's serious shit, dude. No, but it's stuff like that where I question it and I'm like, okay, well, you know, there's some people out there that are saying, people who have worked close with him, that are saying that, no, he's sober. He understands who he's talking to. You know, it's not like he wants to be like these guys, or maybe, I don't know. But, I mean, these are just anecdotes and not exactly data. But at the end of it, I mean, we have these voices to determine whether that's the case or not, you know. I am gonna link that particular documentary in the description below if you guys want to check it out. It's a bunch of, I guess, Republicans that are kind of defected from the Republican Party in a way, and have just lambasted Donald Trump for being the way that he is. So I'm gonna go ahead and link that down below so you guys can go check it out. It's a great watch. Now, yeah, I think that Donald Trump, sometimes when he comes face to face with these dictators, I think it's absolutely dangerous, because these dictators are like bombs, you know, like they have very short fuses, at least in my opinion. So I think it's very dangerous to, I guess, engage with them in that level. And that's kind of how Donald Trump seems to engage with you know, these dictators, because he told a story about how, you know, when he came face to face with Kim Jong-un, he told him how he has a red button that does not initiate a self-destruct sequence, rather initiates a countdown for the end of this person's life.
By the time I finished, we had no problem with North Korea. We were really, it was a little tough at the beginning, remember? Mm-hmm. He said, I have a red button on my desk. I said, I have a red button also, but mine's bigger than yours and mine works.
Did Trump just threaten Kim Jong-un with a good time? No, seriously, what if you end up pressing a button and it jams and then his button works, you know? That's to say that, listen, man, maybe we shouldn't get into conflict with them. But again, this is what people are talking about when they say that Trump isn't a pushover. So I guess, you know, when it comes to, you know, negotiating or perhaps building relationships with people that you perhaps want to make some demands from, I think it's important to establish those relationships, you know, whether you like the person or not. Nonetheless, though, we're done with that topic. Let's go ahead and move on to the final topic, which is Kamala Harris.
Can you imagine Kamala doing this show?
I could imagine her doing this show.
She'd be laying on the floor.
She was supposed to do it, and she might still do it, and I hope she does.
She's not going to do it.
I will talk to her like a human being. I will try to have a conversation with her. If she did this kind of an
interview with you, I hope she does, because it would be a mess. She'd be laying on the floor comatose. You'd be saying, call in the medics.
I think we'd have a fine conversation. I think I'd be able to talk to her. I wouldn't try to interview her. I'd just try to have a conversation with her and hopefully get to know her as a human being. That was my goal.
Now, this is pretty interesting, because I also want Kamala Harris to go on the Joe Rogan show. I don't want to hear her policy. I just want to see who she is as a person, because we know nothing about these people. You know, oftentimes when we listen to, you know, the media talk about Trump, we have a certain perception of Trump, but when he comes on a podcast, we get to see who he is and understand and realize that it's not what the media portrays him to be. Of course, yeah, Trump, he uses a lot of sophistry, he lies a lot, he spreads a lot of misinformation. We know that, you know, we're not stupid, but we want to know who this guy is, you know, because again, when people are going around talking about that he's a fascist, is he really a fascist? Can we see if he really is a fascist? You know, I will say that I have a ton of problems with Trump, for sure. You know, with January 6th, when he said that, when he didn't want to denounce, I think, you know, white supremacy or the Proud Boys. Also, Charlottesville, when he said there was bad people or good people on both sides or something. I don't remember what he said, but when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, bro, if Kim Jong-un presses his button, can you press yours, or are you going to miss? You know, like, I get that impression. So, I don't know, man. I think it's important to see Kamala Harris. I want to know who I'm voting for and relate to her. I want to know what she likes. What's her hobbies. I know nothing about her, you know. Yeah, so I just kind of want to just go ahead and make that criticism, because Trump, you know, he's on that podcast and he's telling Joe, like, you know, you don't look like a Kamala person. Don't vote for Kamala Harris.
He said the country's going to fail. You should do the same thing, Joe, because you cannot be voting for Kamala. Kamala, you're not a Kamala person. I know you. I've watched you. I know him better than he is. You know what? Without speaking to you, I think I know you maybe almost as well as your wife. I have watched you for so many years. You're not a Kamala person.
Apparently, Trump can read Joe like a book, except the book is in a different language. No, but seriously speaking, yeah, man, like, I really want to see Kamala. I want to see what she's about. I don't want to see that correction bullshit. Just, who is she? That's it, you know? And I want her to make a more concerted effort to go on these male-dominated podcasts, because she only goes on women podcasts. What about the men? You know, I cannot connect with her. So please, Kamala, go on these podcasts, man. We want to see you. We want to know who you are. So yeah, now with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. So sorry for the long video. I do not like long videos, but I feel like I needed to make this one as long as possible. So yeah, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. That's all I have for you guys. And yeah, hopefully you guys learned something today.